Welcome, everybody. Today is Friday, February 5th. It is International Clash Day, and we are so happy that you're joining us in today's edition of Music Policy Forum Live. This is Michael Bracy checking in from just outside of Washington, D.C. We've got a really fun program today, using the fact that today is International Clash Day as a jumping off point to talk about the stuff we always talk about policy and music and activism and advocacy and our cultural ecosystems and what we're doing to support them and to help them thrive. As always, if you are so inclined, don't feel obligated, but if you want to say hi via the chat, let us know where you're joining us from. We always love to see where people are participating from. We know you have a lot going on in your lives and are always very appreciative that you are choosing to spend some of your time with us this Friday. If you have questions throughout the program, put them in the Q&A. We'll get to as many as we can get to. And always you can hit us up at musicpolicyforum@gmail.com with broader questions, concerns, ideas, constructive criticism, et cetera, et cetera. Before we bring in our guests, the news of the week, which most of you have been following closely. Again, the Small Business Administration is working as fast as they can to get ready for to put out the guidelines and the timetable for the Shuttered Venue Operator Grant Program. There's a lot of rumors flying around about how soon that may happen. Some people are speculating as soon as next week. Some people think it may pump out a month or two. We really don't know. But obviously keep close tabs on the organizations like NEVA or NIDO or others that you are following for the latest updates and information on that program. The other big news on the kind of money side was the overnight Senate vote at 5:30 this morning, DC time. The United States Senate voted to pass a $1.9 trillion budget authorization that basically now syncs up with the House of Representatives and paves the way for what will be a $1.9 trillion relief package that Speaker Pelosi is leading in the House and hope to have in place later this month. I mean, they're really trying to move fast. So what that means for us in the music community, of course, is a lot more federal resources coming in terms of small business support, in terms of unemployment extensions, all sorts of different things, state and local budget funding, some speculation that they may put additional money into the Shuttered Venue Operator Program. Again, that's not confirmed and we've got a long way to go, but looks like we've got a $1.9 trillion package coming together. So pretty exciting stuff altogether. So today's program, we're gonna, again, kind of go around the horn and we're gonna talk a little bit about why the clash matters. We're gonna talk about policy recommendations that were submitted by the Cultural Advocacy Group to the Biden administration. And then we're gonna talk about some of the great things happening in non-commercial radio and some of the important debates happening about where non-commercial radio can and should be going to maximize its role in the broader community. So with that, again, welcome. We're thrilled you're here. And we have a surprise guest. Tim Quirk is popping in from California. Tim, how are you this morning?
Hi, I'm good.
So Tim, for many of you in the show know Tim well and certainly know his music with Too Much Joy and Wonderlick and other activities he's been involved with for a long time. But I wanted Tim to come in because Tim and I are the same age and the clash really means something to probably, white men of a certain age, it probably hit us at a certain moment of our development and really was a kind of an inspiration musically and also in terms of just the way we think about the world. And I asked him to come on to talk a little bit about the Clash because it occurs to me that a lot of people just don't have any feeling or knowledge of them or any connection to them. And so, Tim, could you talk a little bit about when you were thinking about starting bands and thinking about playing music and where the Clash kind of fit into your consciousness as a band and as a sort of philosophy almost?
Sure. I mean, the Clash, it sounds trite, but the band literally changed my life. I remember very clearly I was 14. I got the US version of their debut. I dropped the needle on track 1, Clash City Rockers, and literally nothing was the same since. In that moment, I was a fairly big music fan. I had Columbia House Record Club, and I had a fairly big LP collection. And it was all the sort of like classic rock standbys, things that, other kids in my junior high school and told me I was supposed to like. And as soon as I heard that first Clash song, about at least half, if not 3/4 of my record collection became irrelevant. Like all the Kiss records I had, all the Aerosmith records I had, they just sounded like silly cartoons, like childish things. Whereas this was, clearly what music was supposed to be. And the band that I ultimately formed, we formed literally just to play Clash covers at high school dances because everybody else was mauling Led Zeppelin tunes, all the rich kids with synthesizers and stuff. And we're like, oh, these dances would be so much better if one of these bands would play a Clash song. And my friends and I looked at each other, we're like, actually, they don't sound like they're that hard to learn. Maybe we could do it. And here I am.
That's fun. And we're going to talk about this in a bit with Gabriel about KEXP and International Clash Day. But one of the things that I think was important for our generation was not just the band themselves and the songs, but the sort of notion of activism and sort of looking beyond your own personal world. And, could you speak to kind of that piece and how that influenced sort of the way that you as a musician, as you had platforms and opportunities sort of moving through your career, thinking about like what can you bring other than making great songs and playing rock shows and all that stuff?
Yeah, well, I'll start before. I mean, they were always a political band, so that was, part and parcel of liking them was figuring out what they were ranting about and why they were so angry. And, they named an album Sandinista. What does that mean? Who the hell are the Sandinistas? And they've got a different point of view than what I'm hearing on the nightly news. So that was clearly like a big part of it, but also just musically, they introduced me to so much more music. Like they broadened the world to me. I was lucky enough to see them a lot in New York when they came through. I saw them at Bonds more than once. And, at Bonds, they would bring out, they'd bring out hip hop acts. They'd bring out poets. They were, they covered reggae songs. They got me into reggae. And so that sort of, the notion of being a global citizen and having a responsibility to other people and not trusting the government was integral to what they were doing. So Too Much Joy was, a lot of people think of us as just this comedy rock band, and we have a sense of humor and we don't take ourselves too seriously, but we do take what we do very seriously. So we never set out to be a political band, but politics was just part of the way we always engaged with the world in our music. So when we saw things that we didn't think were right, like Two Live Crew getting arrested, we were like, okay, we got to do something about this. And in fact, we think all the alternative rock bands should get together and sing a bunch of Two Live Crew songs, and Nick Navarro and the cops in Broward County will have to, basically rent a bunch of school buses to drive all these white people to jail for singing the same songs they got, they busted Two Live Crew for. So that was just always part of, how we engaged.
So Alex put in the chat, there's a great sort of artifact of the past, an MTV News piece on Tim and his bandmates being arrested in South Florida for their protest of singing Two Live Crew songs. So if you, after the show, want to have a blast in the past and some early MTV News stuff, it's pretty great to watch. The other reason, Tim, I just wanted to have you on just real quick, and I just really want to share this with the audience because I think it was such a fun project. You just finished up a multi-year, right? I mean, this was a long endeavor called 5-Star Songs, where basically you looked at your music collection, every song that you had rated 5 stars, you wrote about it, why it deserved 5 stars, and you've put it all in a big old blog that is out there. And I think it's some of the most fun music writing I've read in years, and would definitely recommend that for folks. And I think you write very eloquently about the Clash in those pieces as well.
Thanks. Well, it's interesting. I was, at the end of the project, it was 4 years and 4 months, and I was sort of just doing the math of which bands had the most songs. And I think Dylan had the most songs, and the Mekons had the second most songs. And I was sort of surprised the Clash only came in third or fourth. But then I looked at it, I was like, wait a minute. They had, I think it's like 24, 25 5-star songs. They did that over the course of 6 years. Whereas Dylan, who had like 30, did that over the course of 50 plus. So they packed a lot into their brief time on Earth. Amazing.
And Alex will also put in the chat, Too Much Joy has come out with their first record in many years. We put the Bandcamp link on there. Encourage everybody to go check that out. Is it fun to be back with the guys making new music, Tim?
Oh, absolutely. And in fact, there's a song on the record, which comes out next month, is actually our tribute to the Clash. It's called Shouting Across the Ocean. And it's basically about what Joe Strummer's voice meant to us.
Awesome. Well, we really appreciate you popping in and hope to have you in a future show.
Thanks.
Hang in there. Thank you, Tim.
Okay. Bye, guys.
Bye. And now I am thrilled to welcome into the program Najean Lee, who I tried.
It's fine.
It's close. It was in the ballpark. I am awful with pronunciation. I apologize.
So much closer than others get it. No problem.
Well, we do what we can. So, but we're so thrilled you're with us. With the League of American Orchestras, does a lot of work with the Cultural Advocacy Group, which is a network of cultural organizations that work together on policy. And we talked last week with Heather Noonan from League of American Orchestras about a whole host of things. But we wanted to continue the conversation because this week you all came out with what we thought were some really dynamic recommendations to the Biden-Harris administration about how they should be thinking about cultural policy moving forward. Could you speak a little bit kind of big picture about what that document is and the process that took place to kind of develop that work?
Sure. Thank you so much. So I guess the first thing I should say is the document is not specifically a product of the Cultural Advocacy Group per se. That group, which we call CAG for short, is an ad hoc coalition of a lot of arts and cultural organizations, primarily based in DC, but not entirely. And they tended to be national arts organizations. That was sort of our initial writing group. And 4 years ago, we also did a transition statement for the incoming administration. And so the process has been to really kind of pull the expertise and interest of everyone around that table. And this year, we actually took some pains to make sure that we had a first draft and then ran it by a much broader group of people. So this is really intended to be a document that hopefully can be endorsed by all manner of arts and cultural organizations. We're currently at a little over 100 endorsing organizations from the national, regional, and state level. We're still taking them on. And it's been in official use for about a week now. So I think initially we had thoughts of keeping it to 2 pages, and we quickly realized there was a lot more to say. And if you sort of skim over the document, you'll see that some recommendations are much more specific than others. That's in part because we're speaking to a lot of different organizations. And so some positions are a little bit easier to articulate. Mm-hmm. Others, we kind of have to step a couple levels back to find that common ground point where we can all agree. But I think the probably biggest thing to really emphasize is that this is meant to be a starting place, especially for the Biden-Harris administration. We'd love for them to consider the arts in much more policy because the arts, as my boss likes to say, the arts show up everywhere. Therefore, we should be everywhere policy gets made. And I think that's really the overarching point. It's not exhaustive. It's not covering the full breadth and depth. We know that. We try to acknowledge that. But we want to be a resource. And hopefully all the endorsing organizations can be considered voices that are worth calling upon as the administration starts thinking about, gosh, how can we improve, education policy? How can we improve juvenile justice? What do we need to do to reform things like unemployment, climate change? So we're really everywhere, and we want to make sure that they know that.
So we're going to actually go through the document a little bit in some detail. Alex has put a link to it in the chat if you are interested in just calling up on your own. And Alex is going to share a screen so we can actually just kind of run through. We're not going to go through the entire document in detail. It's 8 pages. There's a lot there. I do want to say Music Policy Forum is very proud and happy to sign on, endorse this vision. We really agree with it. And for those of you who have not been through this kind of transition process before, this is what happens when administrations change. There will basically be sort of a buffer almost, or a transitional team that's in place as the previous administration leaves power and the new administration starts to come together. And this is part of the process, is going, different stakeholder groups engaging with the transition to basically say, these are what we care about. This is what we would like you to think about. And so again, I appreciate what you're saying about, you did a version of this with the Trump transition, did a version with the Obama transition. I mean, this is something that is part of the process. And we just really, really, really value a lot of what's in here, both in terms of some of the big picture stuff and some of the kind of more incremental recommendations. So, let's just, to kick off, again, we're not going to read the whole document, but, maybe Alex, you could advance through to the next page, but you see there on the first page, calling out this sort of notion that if the administration, I like the way that the document places arts and culture into the context of what Biden has and the Biden administration is prioritizing. Could you speak a little bit about that framework from a big picture standpoint?
Sure. So we did, the timing of this shifted a little bit when we realized that this was really going to be a document that was delivered post-inauguration. It actually was an opportunity to tailor it a little bit more to what we knew the Biden-Harris administration priorities were, as opposed to a document that may have been written and delivered, while, pre-November. Mm-hmm. So we realized we really wanted to say more about racial equity. We wanted to address things like climate change. There aren't necessarily specific arts policies in these areas, but we know the arts are affected. The arts have things to say. We're such a great conduit for messages people want to deliver about this. Certainly, throughout, even Inauguration Day, you saw how prevalent the arts were. And so this was really a way of translating that into this policy document. We wanted to pick out as many of those priority areas as possible and show, look, this is how the arts slot in here, here, and here.
Mm-hmm. And, again, that's such an important way to think about it, because we're seeing that certainly in the local work that a lot of us do, that mayors and city councils increasingly say, if we're looking to, do youth engagement work, or if we're looking to do criminal justice work, if we're looking, there's a sort of holistic understanding on the local level of where arts and cultures and music fit into all the different priorities of a city. To broaden out federally is so important, to think about, again, the racial justice issues, climate, COVID, economic recovery, like arts and culture fits into all this. And it's such a reminder of the work that the Obama administration did at the Department of Housing and Urban Development, almost, 11 years ago, 12 years ago, where they, really tried to transform from being a housing agency to an economic development agency, recognizing that arts and culture are central to anything they want to do on a sustainable level, but they didn't know what that meant. So the administration put out $110 million in planning grants to basically get sort of advice and sort of counsel on how HUD policies and funding intersect with the arts and what they could be doing better. And so part of what this document is doing is taking some of that work and broadening it out even wider. So let's go into a couple of the, sort of immediate, you've got some immediate actions and legislative recommendations. Why don't you talk about a few that really jump out at you, again, with the understanding that we don't have time to go through all of them? Sure,
right. Well, one thing I'll say is, again, because we were sort of editing this fairly recently, and again, I will emphasize this was very much a group product. So there's a lot of expertise that went into this, and it's not just housed in one brain. But the executive order that had been revoked on President Biden's first day, that was something we wanted to acknowledge as really important, and specifically the executive order that had. It was banning federal agencies and contractors from conducting essentially anti-racist training. Mm-hmm. The fact that he revoked it was great, because then we were able to update this document and say, instead of please revoke it, thank you for revoking it. And so we thought it was important to call out and acknowledge there are some steps that are already being taken further down, also in this immediate action section. We also acknowledge that the executive order and several presidential proclamations that had to do with discriminatory travel bans, that had also been revoked. And we applaud that. There are more steps to be taken. And so we tried to contextualize that with, we're really heartened to see this. We applaud this movement. And we want to make sure that those artists and other citizens that weren't able to enter the US because of these bans, they need to be given timely consideration, allowed back in. We know that it was possible in sort of limited cases for artists to be engaged from some of those countries that had been targeted by those bans, but we're really looking forward to the sort of cultural mobility being something that we can see more of, especially once we're all feeling sort of safely able to resume live events. Really having that international presence means a lot. And we think that the arts should definitely be utilized more in cultural diplomacy. It's not something that we've been able to do, certainly in this last year, but we'd love to just hit the gas pedal on that when we can.
That's awesome. And we've been able to focus a lot in this program on the whole emerging field of community youth development organizations. We had a great conversation a couple weeks ago with a Philadelphia-based organization. Talk a little bit about sort of the thinking around the arts education ask.
Yeah, I mean, arts education is such a huge area. There are a lot of things that we could, should, and do ask for, and I think it's an ever-growing list. I'd say, at the Department of Education, one of the sort of main asks is that we want to make sure that the arts continue to be recognized, lifted up, supported as a core academic subject. At some point, that language shifted to be well-rounded education. But whatever label you give it, the arts are meant to have equal standing with the other subject areas, math, reading, science. And we want to make sure that at the local level, schools, educators all know that, and that they have that support coming straight from the top. So we really think it's important that the U.S. Department of Education make that really, really clear. The arts are not an add-on. I think everyone here is part of the choir, but we know that on a policy level, that message is very unevenly given. And so there are a lot of opportunities to speak to how important it is, and not just because we want to raise the next superstar, but this is really something that's important for all children everywhere. A public education really needs to include robust access to arts education. So there are some specifics in there, like we need to get the arts back on the National Assessment of Educational Progress's agenda. And that's something that had unfortunately been removed. And that's important from a policy standpoint, because we need to be able to see and measure, what do kids in our country know? What are they able to do? What kind of access to arts education do they have? And once we have those sort of data collections in place, it's kind of maybe unsexy, but from a policy standpoint, it's so important, because that kind of information gets immediately translated into policy action.
Yep, exactly. Alex, let's move on through the document a little bit and see if anything else jumps out that we want to flag. Let's see. Oh, let's talk a little bit about, if you don't mind, just this leveraging across agencies piece, which I think we touched on a little bit, but it's just going to be so interesting to see how the administration kind of takes that, what approach they wind up taking.
Yeah, so I would say the main sort of message here is kind of circling back to that opening statement where we say the arts really intersect with so many other policy areas. And so this was a place to call out, here are some of the agencies where we know arts and cultural policy get made, but here are some other agencies that you should really think about partnering more with, whether it's going to be, research projects that they do together, grant making that need to maybe consider opening applications and calling them out specifically for artists and arts organizations. And this also kind of speaks to this notion of, I think a lot of people have this hunger to see more importance given, a higher profile for the arts in general. So whether that's going to be in a single person, in an office, in a department, we really want to just first and foremost make it clear it needs to be embedded throughout all the federal agencies. And no matter who's going to be doing that work, like here are the areas where you should really get started. And here are some starting points of collaborative opportunities.
And I think, part of what this, the devastation of the shutdown has kind of reframed in terms, or really brought to the fore in terms of the importance of art and culture, is that in many ways, I think policymakers have thought about music and thought about art as just like a sector, an entertainment sector like sports or video games, and I'm going to be really, really interested to see if we have this sort of comprehensive reframing that arts really are different. And they are so, not to be like, high and mighty on this stuff, but they are so essential to our humanity and all the sort of trauma that everybody's going through. It's been very, very, very challenging, to kind of navigate this, the complexities of COVID and everything else that's been happening without access to, in-person arts and in-person gatherings. And it'll be super, super interesting to see if we're able to meld that sort of cross-agency conversation with also a kind of reframing of where arts fits in as a priority for public health and for community building, for all these other things. So that's going to be super fascinating. And one piece I appreciate, Alex went ahead. You don't need to go back, Alex, but one thing that was on the previous page that I want to flag, the support both for access to broadband and high-speed technologies, which again, unfortunately, the experience of this year has really reinforced that this stuff is not optional. It's not a luxury. We really need to rethink our policies related to how our technology platforms work and who has access to them, and then support for the non-commercial ecosystem, which is what we're going to talk about with Gabriel and Jessica in just a minute. But just really understanding that the commercial marketplace is not going to be able to take care of a lot of the things that we need to have a thriving arts and culture sector. And we really need to rethink those investments. I think one of the conversations that we've had on this program and offline, when you talk about $15 billion for Save Our Stages, and we compare that to an annual, public broadcasting budget of about $680 million combined for television and radio and the whole kind of, CBB programming infrastructure, we can think a lot bigger and we can think differently about what this all can look like. So that's going to be interesting to see. So this is just a sense here on screen now. Some of the signatories of the document. Again, you said the process continues for people to add their voices or add their names if they would like to sign on.
Correct. The document is complete, at least this iteration of it. We consider it sort of a jumping off point, but anyone who wants to endorse it, we definitely welcome. So hopefully it's, national, regional, as in multi-state and state level signatories. As much as we'd love to, add local and individuals, just for list management purposes, we kind of had to set some parameters there, but it is certainly open for everyone and anyone to use. We hope it will be put to use and people will, take the bits of it that they, that most resonate with them, and that they will, maybe take this as an opportunity to start a conversation with their policymakers if they haven't. And if they already have, then they can point to this as, hey, I really want to make sure that there are these asks that have been articulated, and I particularly want to draw your attention to, X, Y, and Z.
So if people are interested in getting more information about signing on, what's the best place for them to go?
So there is an email address that's sort of generic, but has been associated with this document, as well as other sort of coalition similar activities that will happen for policy. And that's artspolicystatement@gmail.com.
Awesome. So artspolicystatement@gmail.com, and we'll make sure we put that in the chat. And people can always reach out to Music Policy Forum again at musicpolicyforum@gmail.com if you have questions about this as well. Najean, thank you so much for joining us and walking us through that document and for being part of the team that has done a lot of work and a lot of really creative thinking for a long time to get this where it is. These things are hard to do. We know that you haven't been the sole person kind of driving it, but it's just been great to see the collaboration work to come out with something so dynamic.
Great.
So
thank you.
Thank you for joining us. Have a great rest of your day.
You too.
Awesome. And now we're going to pivot to talk about not only a little bit about International Clash Day, but more importantly about non-commercial radio and the future of non-com radio and the president and the role and everything it does. And Gabriel, Teodros, thank you so much for joining us out of Seattle.
Thanks for having me.
We're so excited that you're with us. For those of you who don't know, Gabriel has the KEXP program early. It's just called early, right? It's just flat out early.
Yeah.
5 a.m. Seattle time, which I was telling Gabriel earlier in DC, that's 8 o'clock. So that's perfect timing for us here
nice.
In our neck of the woods. But he's been doing Monday, Friday, right? I mean, all the way through the week.
Yeah, every weekday.
Every weekday. How are you doing with the 5 a.m. shift?
Man, it's rough, man. I'm up at 3 a.m. every morning pretty much. But I love it. Like since I started at KEXP, I always kind of wanted to be on 5 days a week, just to be able to respond to things in real time more regularly, have little special days of programming. And it's been a blast,
So today's fun, as we said with Tim at the beginning. Again, the Clash mean a lot to certain people and they mean less to others. And it's fun that KEXP, like other, non-commercial radio stations, have an opportunity to do kind of kitschy, fun stuff like this. And certainly, one of the things that I thought was so spectacular, we're going to put the link to the archive of your set this morning is online already, and we're going to put that into the chat. And I could not recommend it, highly enough. I just thought it was so moving because, again, the Clash for me, and I think Tim said this better than I can say it, but for me was sort of that awakening point, as a kid, that you can have amazing music, but you can also have the ambition to try to understand your world and talk about your world and talk about different types of music and different, things happening in your community. And what you did this morning, which I just thought was so spectacular, was like the Clash should not be in a museum. Band, I mean, you can have music museums. It's fine to do that. Mm-hmm. But really it's about how do things connect to what's happening now.
Exactly.
And to hear, so talk a little bit, I'm sorry, I'm talking too much. Tell us a little bit about how you guys are approaching the day and what the intention is in terms of this kind of silly holiday, made up holiday, and how you're connecting to community organizations and activism.
Yeah. So I think this is the 9th year that the KEXP has had International Clash Day. And if anyone's like unfamiliar with the history of it, the way it started is hilarious. John Richards, the host of the morning show, was playing a Clash song randomly one morning. The day has no significance other than this story. He was playing the Clash one morning and a listener requested another Clash song. So he played 2 Clash songs back to back. And then more listeners started responding. And all of a sudden he had all these Clash requests. So he said, okay, it's International Clash Day. And it happened that spontaneously in the moment. And now we have like a holiday that's actually like acknowledged in several cities all around the world. Like different radio stations have been tapped in. It's been really inspiring to see like how many people have just jumped on and said, yeah, International Clash Day, we're riding for it, I did not grow up on the Clash. I did not know about their music. I'm a hip hop head. Like I am a child of hip hop first and foremost. I'm a hip hop artist before I even came to the radio. So for me, doing Clash Day this year, and this is the first year that I've participated, I had to do some homework, and it was fun. Like I learned a lot, but I also heard things I didn't like, particularly the song White Riot. Mm-hmm. I heard that song. I was like, oh yeah, they just weren't thinking of me or people of color when they made this song at all, So there's an element of that as well. But like with respect to all the positive things that they've done for, people all around the world. And I really, what I loved most about what I learned in studying the Clash's music is the way they spoke to international issues, the way they spoke out consistently against oppression. The Sandinistas album in particular really stood out to me, speaking about, things that were happening with the US's involvement in Nicaragua. And I was able to connect that in the show today to the crack era, you know what I mean? And so I looked at songs like that, songs that talked about something that I could connect to something happening now. I started the show with London Calling. I listen to so much music out of London today. Like it's ridiculous. Like I kind of wish I could have just done a couple of hours of music from London being made right now, but there was so much I wanted to touch. So, I started with London Calling and then I just kind of transitioned into the music of London now, across genres. I thought it was really interesting that Joe Strummer himself was a big fan of early hip hop, supporter, collaborated with people, brought hip hop artists and poets on stage, like the brother was talking about earlier. So I thought that was cool. I found some songs that sampled the Clash. And most importantly, the influences, because they were so influenced by reggae music. And I wanted to point to a lot of those kind of artists. And to answer the other part of your question, so this year, every year, Clash Days kind of had different themes. We were talking about what this year's theme would be. I believe it was the same week that the insurrection happened at the U.S. Capitol, which was fascinating because, there were signs that literally of these people that ran in the Capitol that said we're anti-fascist, which really doesn't mean anything other than you're a fascist. You know what I mean? And there's just been such this like misinformation about what Antifa is, you know, coming from 45 all the way to the right-wing media and Fox News and everything. Like, is Antifa an organization? Like, no, it's just anti-fascism. And that shouldn't be scary. Like, the United States was anti-fascist in World War II when we were fighting Nazis. It's not a radical thing to say you're anti-fascist. You know what I mean? But, you know, so we kind of focused in on this quote from Joe Strummer, where he said, we're anti-fascist, we're anti-racist, we're anti-violence, we're anti-ignorance, you know, we're pro-creative. And we just focused on that as a theme. Somebody brought up the idea to bring in community organizations who do that work and highlight them throughout the week and throughout the show. So it kind of just got put on my shoulders to get all these organizations in, and we did that. And also on the international level, my coworker Albina, who co-hosts the Latin music show on Mondays, El Sonido, she developed a bunch of amazing partnerships with radio stations from around Latin America. So on every show, we're highlighting a different partner radio station, and we have guest sets from them. So I highlighted a set from Mexico this morning, which was really awesome. And yeah.
And part of what was so moving, I thought, about your show this morning, and I know it's happening throughout the day and others are doing versions of this, but you had community organizers. So as a platform for community organizers to talk about their work and talk about what they're engaged in, but then to connect it to music that inspires them. That's exactly. Like from now.
Exactly.
You know? And that to me is what really just kind of squared the circle, because you got, you know, I mean, you got the Clash, you've got the, you know, again, I don't want to, you know, ruin everybody's experience of Gabriel's set this morning, but, you know, closing out with Tosh, I mean, it was just amazing. You know, this incredible, you know, kind of deep Peter Tosh cut, you know, that was part of what inspired, you know, the Clash, that kind of music. But then also, you know, here's Nipsey Hussle. I mean, here's stuff that is happening in the moment, you know, that is really inspiring, you know, doing for the 14-year-old version of me now, you know, so what the Clash meant to me when I was a kid, there's all this amazing art and culture, which again, is a big part of what KEXP does, right? So, you know, and we've talked about this in previous shows, so we don't need to kind of go through it because we talk about KEXP a lot, but the whole kind of reconceptualization of what a community radio station is. And you know, could you speak to like how that fits in the different pieces of your world? Because you've got a musician artist side, you've got sort of community engagement side, you've got the radio station, you've got, I mean, all the different pieces that, you know, KEXP kind of is the hub, right?
Mm-hmm. It is. It's a great it's a great home for connecting people to all this great independent, local, national, international music that otherwise wouldn't be heard anywhere else. And I don't know, I feel like I've consistently been doing the work of bringing all the pieces of myself together, and the work that I do on KEXP is just one place where I can do that. And there's certain things that I can't do on the air as well. Like I can't talk about my own music as much. I definitely can't promote it or play it. You know what I mean? So, but it's still something really special to be able to be of service every single day, to connect with human beings, to engage with the listeners. And like we did today, bring in like some, you know, amazing community organizers and give them a platform to speak about what they're doing, to hopefully highlight and bring some more energy to the stuff they're doing, and also get them to, you know, talk about the music that inspires them. So, yeah.
That's awesome. And let's bring Jessica into the conversation, and Alex put the Bandcamp link for Gabriel's work, so everyone should check out his music as well. And Jessica, welcome. Thank you for joining us.
I'm here. I'm just like totally overwhelmed and like furiously scribbling notes over here, basically.
Well, hopefully not all constructive criticism on what we'll do better next week.
No, I just think it's all really relevant conversation that all, you know, has been, it's all connected basically is what I realize. Everything from the work that Najean is talking about to like your points about how we have to learn how to better integrate art and culture into policy, because it's truly what fuels humanity. Not to be like too like corn cheesemo, but like it's really what drives us and inspires us. And like, I think this year, with us all being stuck at home and being, kind of left to our own devices, we're realizing how essential and important art is, and community and all the things which you guys are touching on now.
So let's back up and give you a proper introduction or some proper context. So Jessica is one of the ringleaders behind another new initiative that came grew out of 2020, in which again, and we've talked about this in previous shows. And again, I don't mean to be like nostalgic or whatever, but it is just, I've been blessed to do this work for almost 25 years, and to see all the innovation and entrepreneurship and just people getting together and organizing and seeing like there's something that we want to engage with. We're going to get the squad together. We're going to put our people together. We're just going to take one step, forward. And whether that's Neva or Nita or Be an Arts Hero, or I think, what FairPlay has been up to, I just think is really, really inspiring. And I know, Gabriel, you've intersected with that work as well. Jessica, why don't you talk a little bit about the work you do in your day job, but then talk a little bit about FairPlay, if you don't mind, please.
Well, my day job is running an artist development company called Cosign. We've been working, helping break independent emerging artists for, the last decade. We specialize in radio promotion. We pitch music to music supervisors and brand folks for placement in film and TV, and also do our fair share of marketing campaigns with brands and stuff like that as well. And that has really, been the core of my business, for the last 20 years, if I'm being honest. I worked for another radio promotion company before that and really kind of cut my teeth in Los Angeles and then moved out here. But have always really been centered around hip hop and dance music, and have of course built into something bigger. Now we represent a ton of rock bands and independent artists from all over the globe, truly. But this conversation around diversity and kind of like fighting for space on playlists is not anything that's new to us. And I think kind of it's been a part of the conversation. Diversity has been a part of the conversation in non-commercial radio for as long as I can remember. And I think what we saw this summer was like a culmination of things with the unrest that happened around George Floyd, and people kind of realizing, okay, we've been having this conversation for a really long time. It's time to take these matters into our own hands and actually make moves on it. So from the moment the Capture, the Pause the Show initiative launched, we took a day to kind of stand back and speak internally as a company, but also invited all of our community to form this or come on this community call with us and talk about what was going on, what we want to do, how we want to move forward. And that's since evolved into what is now FairPlay, a nonprofit organization, which still meets every Tuesday. We still have our community call every Tuesday. And we've just, we keep building and getting more members every week. We have great people from stations like KEXP, but we also have stations from Grand Rapids, Minnesota. We have stations from Los Angeles. We have stations from Raleigh, North Carolina. And we're talking to DJs, labels, independent music labels, whoever, about just kind of how we can work as a community to kind of make moves on those issues. And we've put together a list of goals and actions, and together have been really working towards encouraging stations and just folks within our community to keep this conversation around what's been going on in the protest, the movement for Black Lives, just elevating voices within different communities, connecting with community, truly encouraging stations to become the servants of their communities, which they have been always intended to be, and really putting it on ourselves to create a toolbox for people to engage and start this conversation with listeners, with online, with their family members, wherever they can, essentially. And yeah, I mean, it's been a beautiful thing. Gabriel's been awesomely supportive of us. I'm so thankful for you. He was on a great panel we did with the folks over at WXPN for non-convention, which was truly kind of like giving folks an explanation of the group and what our goals and actions are. He was on with Davey D, Tariq from Radio Milwaukee, Steb from KRML, and this woman named Malia Lazou, who's been an amazing help to our organization. She works at Urban Labs and has a consulting company based in Boston. And we've just been slowly adding folks into the mix. I won't ramble on forever, but we're working on a lot of great stuff and still building this toolbox, which any of our collaborators and members can access to really help kind of, if you don't have a newsroom, but you want to be covering this issue, here's content you can run and use. If you don't have social media posts that are relevant to what's going on right now, here's what we've created that, you can take and repurpose. So it's constantly kind of evolving and building on those different levels.
And I appreciate what you said in terms of the through line of the conversations today, because, really it gets at, this whole question of how do we think about public media? What is public media? What is non-commercial media? What is its role? What's its function? What tools does it have as disposal? And how, does public media and music, focused public media stations, how do they fit into some of these broader questions around equity and justice? And sort of a real, sort of honest recognition that the music industry that, was shut down in March of 2020 can't just be back up at it the way it's been. I mean, we talk a lot about, how hokey Build Back Better is, but that's exactly right. I mean, we need to be very intentional and mindful about the kind of structural challenges the industry faces.
We have to give it up, though, to the radio stations out there who have pivoted and just made it happen. It's amazing. All the at-home broadcasting, all the basically all the little tweaks that they did on a dime to make sure that they were still present and coming to us and providing us news or our musical landscape or whatever it is. It was pretty inspiring to see.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. So one of the things we talk about are just resources. And we talk about, and we think a lot about, again, the idea that the Corporation for Public Broadcasting started as a vision, 50, 60 years ago. And it sort of was meant to fill a need that was perceived in the 1960s about what commercial media would or would not be able to do and how that related to what we wanted to see from a public policy perspective. And so, a lot of us have been having these conversations about what does that look like in the future? How do we reconceive that and how to resource that? What does that funding level need to be and what kind of jobs need to be filled? I mean, could you, I know it's sort of an impossible question because, we're just having to sort of crack open the preconceived notions of the world that we lived in for so long in terms of public media. But I would love to hear either of your thoughts or both of your thoughts about what does that reconceptualization look like in this broader context of all these pieces kind of fitting together, that it's not about a public radio station anymore. It's about a community organization that does all these different things if they want to. Mm-hmm. I don't know, is that a question you can do anything with?
Absolutely. For me, just as a DJ at KEXP, I think of us as stewards of a public, of a public radio station. And as that, it's our job to always look at what stories are not being told, who's not in the room, what voices are getting left out. And if there's, some voices that are not in the room, it becomes our job to bring those voices in to make sure they're heard and to make sure they're paid, to make sure nobody's tokenized in this either, and it's constantly a work in process, you know what I mean? And people respond to it in a really deep way. I think that's something I want people to really know about the changes that have happened at KEXP, that our numbers are higher than they've ever been since they added some people of color to DJ during the day. You know what I mean? Since they made these programming changes where they've, they've just brought in more voices. So everyone wins when more people get heard, you know? Everyone wins, you know? And I go back to the principles from the Allied Media project a lot. Just when I'm thinking about work that I'm doing, a few key things that I always think about are to begin by listening, and know that no matter what issues you're facing, no matter what issues there are in the world, there's always people working on it. Find those people and amplify those voices, learn from them, you know? Mm-hmm. It's not our job to always like try to recreate the wheel or, you know, act like we're pioneers in anything. One of my great mentors, Haile Garima, said to be a pioneer, to be the first of something is a great failure. You know, anytime that somebody says you're the first of something, it's your responsibility to find people that have done it before you and learn from their mistakes so you can, you know, be a part of that continuation and do it better. So I don't know. Those are my pieces of advice. I also just want to say that, man, I'm such a huge like fan of all the work that FairPlay has done. Like I'm friends with Jessica. She's helped my career, but also just like in the last year with FairPlay, like I've gotten so much from the few community calls I was able to make it to. They've definitely helped inform my work, and that toolbox that she's talking about has definitely, you know, I've used things from that on the air in KEXP. It helped, you know, just build tools for the election. So I just wanted to publicly say that. Thank you, Jessica. You're amazing. You're welcome.
I mean, truthfully, like the group is amazing. I really just am in there kind of moderating the conversation. That's how I see my role. I'm the person that connects the dots. I do want to also agree with you in that, like, there are a ton of groups out there right now doing great work around these issues. And I think the more that we talk to people like Public Media for All or the Black Music Action Coalition, or we read what's happening, you know, like I know Celeste Headley just published a large open letter. Like everybody's doing great work, and there is, to tackle the problem and move forward truly, I think we have to be kind of looking at all of this stuff and been cherry picking the stuff that makes sense and moving forward from there. Like the issues with public media, I feel like, and just kind of, I guess maybe I should speak more just to the music side, is that like people have like kind of a preconceived notion of what it is. You know, it's always been kind of like, especially non-com stations or whatever, it's like kind of like a white indie rock thing. It's run by, you know, older folks, and we're looking at like, you know, we need to diversify our audience if we want to keep building and growing. And I mean, I think that's where KEXP kind of won, is that like they saw this moment and they moved on it right away and made changes to their on-air staff, but also made a ton of changes internally. Even before everything that happened over the summer, KEXP is the first station I ever knew about that would translate their press releases into Spanish or add, you know, like the Albina's up on the YouTube talking to everybody in Spanish when they have sessions. Like we need to be doing forward thinking things like that to make other, like all audiences feel included in broadcasts and kind of moving forward. And like, I think that like, that's kind of what we're doing. Our group is kind of like, all these different stations meeting together to talk about like, okay, we tried this. This is what we're doing. Like, so, you know, 2 weeks ago, we have on Stacy from Louisville Public Media talking about their D&I study. You know, next week we have like, you know, somebody coming on, Bruce from Indy 103 in Colorado, to talk about the initiative that they're doing for Black History Month. Like we are truly collaborating to make sure we're sharing information, we're sharing content, and like everybody has everything they need to kind of like, oh, I could do that, I could move that. You know, we did a workshop last week with a community group here in New York City called Capture the Movement, and the woman is a filmmaker here, but she was just like, here's how I put this together, this photo exhibit together, and it turned into, you know, a conversation about how easy it was and how much you gain just by reaching out to talking to a community organizer, a community leader. I think like in having these conversations, it becomes easier and more normalized for stations to begin thinking this way. Like, I can't tell you how many times we hear that from folks, like, oh, I'm just doing this now because this is what we should be doing, you know? And I think that that's like, we need to be sharing information and sharing ideas. And so everybody's kind of like truly reconnecting, and like, it's not going to be the same process for everybody. I mean, we're learning that as we go, right? You know, but there is always, I haven't found one person I've talked to that's been like, oh no, nobody's interested in like, you know, reconnecting with me, no, talking to us about this, you know, like there's excitement, and there is like, it's kind of like, you know, people getting involved with community, with non-commercial radio. It's like, they want to build this community. They want to be a part of something. And like, by bringing people in, whether it's community leaders like KEXP is doing, or somebody, you know, an outside photographer who's talking about what they're doing, like you're changing the way that you're telling the story. You're getting news directly from the source, you know, and that's over and over with something we've been hearing. I'm sure you have too, Gabriel.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Yeah.
I think, Jessica, I think it's so smart, because a lot of what I feel like you're doing at FairPlay is, you know, there's this great concept called climate grief, right? Which is that climate change is so overwhelming, you just can't get your head around it and just shut down as a human being. And with a lot of these structural issues that we talk about, there's similar dynamics where it's too big. Like, how do we fix music? Like, what do we do? Like, how do you get there? What does it even look like? And what I love about the work that you're doing is it's just like, just put one foot in front of the other, like just share information, share ideas, do stuff, like just kind of chip away. And as you're chipping away, everybody's getting more engaged and sort of smarter about what these things, you know, could look like. And then we can see the structural change through alignment with organizations like the Non-Com Music Alliance, which is the first time that 140 music-facing public radio stations have come together to figure out what are their roles, and KEXP is being the driver in that national movement, connecting in again to the broader policy work that we were talking about earlier in terms of resources and funding, and, you know, what is the federal commitment to this ecosystem, and, you know, just really, you know, just figuring out what everybody's doing and how it potentially aligns to redefine what's possible, which right now in a vacuum is impossible to do. Like we can't, like how do we get from here to there? What does that even look like? So, you know, I just think it's been so impressive, you know, to see the work that your organization and others are doing to say, let's just not be cowed by it. Let's not be intimidated by the scale of the challenge. Let's not even feel like we need to understand what the end goal is. Let's just get, you know, kind of build and see where it takes us.
I mean, I think that this, like, we haven't had to, in my, you know, years and working in public radio, there hasn't been like a movement like this where people are like, let's go. Right. And so instead, nobody wants to stand by and do nothing. That's what we've realized in all of these conversations. So, you know, we're trying a bunch of different stuff out, you know, and that's all, and we're having uncomfortable conversations and making mistakes. And we have such a great crew of people who are understanding and correct us. And like, you know, we do our best to bring people in to like, you know, let us, you know, to educate us and tell us what they're doing. And we are working on, you know, a couple of like actions, you know, that are more direct actions, like putting together recommendations for internal audits and kind of like looking at like what people's structure look like. And I mean, you know, we're always encouraging people to like go through playlists and stuff, but like, you know, really looking internally to see where change needs to happen. And then like, as far as like diversifying audiences go, you know, we're sponsoring an initiative which is meant to be more of a community connection project. It's centered around underwriting and kind of gifting underwriting to Black-owned businesses and like specific stations, localities, but it's meant to be a partnership between, you know, the station and a business that they otherwise probably wouldn't have known about or had a connection to. And so that both sides can build, you know, audience, consumer base, whatever you want to, like, whatever weird thing, you know, you want to call it. And people are really excited about it, you know, and who knows, we'll see if that works, you know, like I'm a huge believer in, I want to be supporting, you know, these stations, but I also want to be supporting these amazing businesses. Both are providing such amazing flavor to their communities, and like they're important. They're what make us, you know, and make these cities who they are. So like we have some of the best storytellers around working in non-commercial radio. If we can help elevate their businesses and their communities, like, we have a responsibility to do that.
I love that. I love that. Well, so Jessica, if people watching today's program are interested in learning more, we've got the website in the chat, but what's the best kind of pathway for folks to plug into and amplify your work?
Oh, I mean, they can always, anybody who they'll go to the website. There's obviously a donation button if you want to donate the sponsorship program I was just talking about. But also there's an email button. You can send us a note. We'll add you to our updates and kind of agendas, and you can follow along with the stuff that we're working on. And yeah, I mean, we're always building. We're open to ideas. We want to be working with as many stations and folks as we can, and building with as many people as we can in the space. And Michael, I'm so interested to talk to you more about the policy side and how I can help, or how we can wiggle into what you guys are doing on that side also. So
lots of stuff to do. Well,
yeah.
I just really appreciate, Gabriel, you spending time with us today and everything that you bring to the world, and such a inspiration to keep us moving. And Jessica, everything that you guys are doing with FairPlay and your whole networks. And of course, Najean, thank you for walking us through all the complicated policy stuff and keeping that Capitol Hill advocacy going. And of course, thanks as always to our producer, Alex Dolvin, who always does a great job keeping this going. So,
ooh, one thing I will plug before we leave is we just launched a collaboration shirt today with our friends from Record Break-In in Philly, Black-owned record label in Philadelphia. Amazing label, by the way. I put the link in the chat if you guys want to check it out. Whatever, give us a follow on Instagram. But also, the proceeds go half to us and half to a nonprofit organization of their choosing, based in Philly. We've been doing these collaborations like every other month and stuff. So just want to give them a little plug since they were so great to put us on this month.
Awesome. All righty. So thank you all for participating and watching today. And we are just, trying to keep up. So as always, questions, comments, suggestions, gently worded constructive criticism at musicpolicyforum@gmail.com. And we will have this program archive up probably on Monday. If there's something you saw today that you want to share with your friends and colleagues, please feel free to share that link. And we look forward to seeing you next Friday. Have a great, safe weekend and enjoy International Clash Day. Thanks all.